Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us for the final part of our webinar series. By way of introduction, my name is Craig Nathan Moss, and I'm Head of Engagement here at Gridfox. And that role entails a few tasks. One of those is training people like yourselves on today's webinar, but also I act as a link between what our users are feeling and our product team. So I'll speak to people who are telling us what's great about Gridfox, who are telling us about the things we could look to do next and things we can improve on. All that's fed back to try and create a real customer-driven product. There have been 4 webinars already, and if you haven't had the chance to see those, you can catch them on our website. There's just a little link at the top which says webinars. And today we're going to be covering the final and probably the most complicated one of all, which is ID masks and data relationships. So without any further ado, let's open up this project that I have created ready for today's session. So there's loads of tables on here. Don't worry too much about that. I'm going to go through one at a time. Just to explain everything that I want to cover in today's session. And the first topic on that list is ID masks. Now, what on earth is an ID mask, I hear you cry? Well, let's have a look at, first of all, this here. So you'll see I've got a 2-table setup. Maybe Euro 2021 is still in the back of my mind, but we've got teams and we've got players. So teams is the parent account and teams have lots of players within them. So when I go to that, it looks like this. I've got Gridfox United, click into it, and you can see a player down here. And I can also click on players. Now, if I was to create a new player and try and assign it to a team afterwards, maybe it's because I'm importing lots of data. Look what happens when I do that. So I'll put any random name in, select a position, put an age in. But when I go to team, all I can see is 1 and 2. Now, there's only 2 records on this example, so maybe it's not too difficult for me to remember which is which. But in a situation that's more realistic, I could have hundreds of records, and there's no way of me connecting who number 1 and who number 2 are. And the reason why it's showing as 1 and 2 is because my team ID is my reference field. So it will always show the reference field when you're trying to select that data. And as we know from previous sessions, the ID is quite simply a number that will go up chronologically. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., etc. But not useful when I'm trying to determine who to connect my player to. Now, the way that we overcome that is by creating an ID mask. So on the left-hand side of the screen at the bottom, you'll see this area here, which allows me to input an ID mask. Now, there's a couple of things to remember when doing ID masks. These are really important items. The first is your ID mask must contain your reference field. And secondly, your fields must be quoted in square brackets. So to give you an example of how what I've just said wouldn't work, if I was just to put name, name in here, and try and validate this, it wouldn't allow it because it's not stating the reference field, which is the team ID. So that has to be put somewhere in. So these square brackets help the system identify the field. What we would then, so we basically saying we want to show the name. What we're then saying is we also want a way of showing team ID. And we can quite simply do that by typing team ID in brackets afterwards and validating that mask. And you'll see it says ID mask is valid right there. I am aware there is a red box up here saying there's an error. Please forgive me about that. We have found a bug that we're working on and it should be corrected in the next few days. But if you just X out of it and save, you'll see that it lets you proceed. So now let's see what happens. Now that I've put the ID mask in, when I go to create a player now, it actually shows the team and then the number after it as well. So Audacia 2, Gridfox 1. Could get a little bit confusing because I do know that there are some football teams with numbers in their name like for example, I think 1860 Munich or something like that. So further to adding that ID, you can do other things. So you could put a little dash in there, or maybe it's better in this scenario to actually put some circular brackets around the square brackets. Now what will happen is when I save it and go back to players, you'll now see that that ID mask shows with the reference field in brackets, which is a lot easier to understand and digest. Okay, so hopefully that's simple enough to understand. Just as a quick refresh, we're putting field names in square brackets. It has to include the team ID. Doesn't matter which way around it is, as long as team ID features. And you can add symbols to help identify what the team ID is compared to other data that might be in that line. Okay, let's move on to another example. This time we have companies and we have contacts. So companies is the parent table, and within the companies, we can have multiple contacts. And what this looks like on the front end is we've got these companies here, click into one, and you can see the contacts. Now there's a potential issue with this. I should have mentioned that the unique reference field is the website. And the potential issue here is actually the website doesn't give much clue as to who this company is. So Deliver Stuff belongs to Tufnells because they're a logistics company, and HRB belongs to this company called Browns. It could stand for anything. It could stand for, you know, initials before the Browns. But ultimately, if I click into contacts now, I'm looking at Sandra Foster and it says HRB, it's not too helpful. I don't know where she belongs unless I'm going through the company to see their employees. But sometimes I might just want to look at all the contacts and see where they belong. Now, the reason this is a little bit different from the first example is because we want to pull the name of the company onto the child table. So in the previous example, the name, so just to give you some clarity, the website's a unique reference on the company, the name is a unique reference on the contact. So as I showed previously, if I wanted to just put name in here, because I wanted to basically show this name because it's my reference field, but also show this name as well. Well, unfortunately, name isn't going to work because it's going to think I'm putting this in here twice. And actually, if I validate this, it's probably going to work exactly as we expect. And you can now see Sandra Foster, because we've effectively just put, we've ID masked the name twice. What we want to identify is the fact that it's coming from this table. Now, in order to do that, you need to identify the singular name that you've titled this. So mine says companies. Remember, when you put titles onto tables in Gridfox, it will automatically put the plural version on where you can see now. So if I click into this, and on the left-hand side, I can see my table settings. I can see the singular name is actually company. So let me go back and go over this ID mask. The way that we do it is what we say is we want to put the table name first. So company followed by a dot. So that's basically saying look at the company table and then pull the field name from this data. And when I validate the ID mask now and save it, you'll see that it first of all allows it. And secondly, when I go back in to contacts, Sandra Foster Browns is now written. It's a lot easier for me to understand where that person lives. Okay, let's go on to the next part of this demonstration. And this is possibly the hardest thing that I found when I joined Gridfox without having any development experience. It's something called data relationships. Now, this isn't specifically a Gridfox feature. This is an industry way, a technique almost, of understanding how data relates to each other. And for the purpose of this, obviously, I'm going to use Gridfox to try and demonstrate it. You may have to watch over this a couple of times and certainly the last part that we do. But let's start with the simple ones. And I've got a single table here called identifications. I'm going to go back to my project, and I'm going to click on it right here. Oops, here it is on the left. Now, with this type of data relationship, you may hear it being referred to as a one-to-one relationship, which means one set of data can only be related to another set of data. So, for example, let's assume we're logging people's names against their passport numbers. James Kelly, as an individual, will only ever have one passport number. That is unique to him. And that one passport number will only ever belong to James Kelly. So there's only one piece of data there that can relate to one other piece of data. James Kelly, for example, cannot have this passport number and this passport number, nor can he have this passport number that belongs to Claire, because that's hers. So James Kelly can just have one passport number, and one passport number belongs to James Kelly. Okay, hopefully you're still with me so far. That bit's pretty simple. The next bit is also pretty simple, and we've used examples of this as we've been building Gridfox projects through the last few weeks together. Families have names. So let's just have a look. First of all, we've got two separate tables. There's no relationship yet. And I'm going to show you that in this family, the Harris family, imagine that as your own family. So your surname plus all the members of that family that live there. So Ben, Jane, Christian, Alice, for example, in this case. Now, if I go back into Table Explorer, I'm going to form a relationship using this link icon. And when I click through to the other link icon, I can see a couple of options here. Now, ignore the bottom box for now. It's asking me a question. It's saying to me, do families have multiple names? So does the Harris family have Ben, Sandra, whoever else was part of that? The answer is yes. So that is the right relationship. The other option would be the wrong relationship. So, for example, does Sandra have many surnames? Well, no, she doesn't. She only has Harris as a surname because that's the way that this data is set up. So I'll click on that top one and I'll apply it that way. And that relationship will determine which is the parent account and which is the child account. Now, because the surname is, if I just remove that and show you again, because the surname here can have multiple names, that becomes the parent table. And when I save that, what that now means is if I go back to my project and click on families, I can now connect all these people. There was no Sandra, it was Jane. All these people to the surname of Harris. So that is a one-to-many relationship. One surname with many family members connected to it. Okay, and I hope that makes sense too. I can show it the other way around if that's going to help. So let's remove this relationship. Let's say this time that names have multiple families. When I now try and tag in Harris, first of all, there's no option for me to do so. So I've got to go into the names and say, right, Ben, he's a member of, well, he's a member of the Harris family. Save that. However, if I then try and add somebody else to this, Jane, she's a member of the Harris family too. Save. Look what happens. So now, if I click in here, Jane is connected to that Harris family, but Ben no longer is. Because of the way I set it up, they can only have one family attached to their name. It's just not the right way of doing this data. And that is the impact that you'll have if you get relationships the wrong way around. And I guess the reason why I've shown you that is the silver bullet here. You'll quickly realize that it's not set up the way that you want because you can't do what you want to do. So in this case, just as a reminder, and I know I keep saying this, but I'm really hoping to hammer home this one before we move on to the complicated one. Families can have many members, and those members have different first names. That's the way you want it set up. And so we come to what's called a many-to-many relationship. This is the one that really, really got me. And I'm going to show you in two different ways. And we have, since I joined, really tried to simplify this through the interface to guide you through each step of the way. So I'm going to select destinations. In fact, let me explain what I've got here. So let's pretend that I am traveling around Europe. And I want to see all the destinations that I'm potentially going to visit. And I want to see all the activities that I can do within these destinations. So I've got a list of destinations, a list of activities. But let's say, for example, in Germany, I know that you can do bungee jumping, wine tasting, scuba diving. There's more than one activity. Now, if that was set up like above, it'd be fine. I could log all those activities next to Germany and see what I could do there. However, what if I wanted to click by activity and see all the destinations that I could do that activity in? It's a many-to-many relationship. Germany can have many activities, and activities can have many different destinations in which you can do them. So let's start building this right now. And I'm going to go to next, and we're faced with another option. I'm going to show you both and how they impact things, so don't worry about that for now. But what they're saying is, in this direct relationship, this first box, we don't want to store any further information about this relationship, i.e., we just want to list what activities Germany has, and we just want to list all the places you can go wine tasting. So just focus on this for now. We're going to save that, and I'm going to show you exactly how this looks. So we've got our destinations in Germany. Let's start adding some activities in there. Let's say we can do wine tasting and go to the theatre. In France, we can actually do everything. Maybe in Italy, we can do everything as well. And in Spain, we can just do skydiving. So now if I click on destinations, because of this relationship, in Germany, I can see all the things that I can potentially do. Same in France and Italy and Spain as well. And if I click into my activity to help me plan, I can see all the destinations that I can do this activity through. So that is why it's called a many-to-many relationship, because countries have many activities and activities have many countries. Pretty simple once it's broken down like that. Let's go back to the Explorer, because this time I'm going to remove this relationship. Let's give another example. Let's now say, okay, we've managed to get around Europe. We've done some of these things. And it's great that Germany has all these potential things, but where did I actually do the activity? And I want to know a bit more about it, just to remind myself, almost like a diary. How good was it? What was the feeling like? Now, in order to do that, we are again going to use this many-to-many relationship. But this time, we're going to create a join table in which we can add further information. So for example, just to keep it simple, I want to know the date in which I did the activity. And I also want some notes just to remind myself exactly how it was like. Let's save that. And we'll create just an auto counter field as the unique reference. Now, when I go back to my table, I am adding the destination activities to it. And if I go to activity, I'm doing the same thing, destination activities. So this is no longer linking destination and activity directly, it's linking them in between. And I can add records based on this. So I'm in wine tasting now. Let's assume that I did that in France. It was on this day and loved the Sauvignon Blanc. Oh, really set myself up to fail here, haven't I? Let's just put SB. I love the SB. So I can go through it that way, and suddenly I can see a list of all my activities of where I did wine tasting. Maybe I did it in more than one country. So let's add another one in there. I also did it in Italy on this day, and it was good. I'll save myself further embarrassment there. So now I can see a list of all the times that I did wine tasting. Likewise, if I clicked into Italy, I can see all the activities I did in that country. And if I create something fresh from this destination activity and click new, it allows me to select both activity and destination. So it's scuba diving in Spain. It was on this day and I got wet. I can save that. So this could act as a really good memoir. First of all, I can see all the activities I did, and I can see it by the activity itself and the destination, or I can click through each of these destinations and see exactly what I did in there as well. So the use of that extra table has allowed us to capture further information based on what we already had. Okay, I hope that makes sense. One thing that I'll say is it took me a while to get my head around this. Not so much the concepts. So the concepts that I've described here, hopefully are pretty easy to follow. That's not the difficult part. The difficult part is thinking, I've got this great idea of something I want to build within the Gridfox application, and I'm trying to work out what type of relationships I need between tables. That's the biggest challenge you'll face. But as I demonstrated with the families and names, give it a go, create a relationship, test it with some data. If it's not how you think it's going to be, then just try the relationship a different way. You can't break anything. As long as you're not deleting your records, then it's still going to be there. Okay, I should have mentioned at the beginning that there is the ability to ask questions through this. Hopefully you know that by now. I can see some familiar faces on this call. So there are a couple that have come in, but please feel free to ask some more now. I'm going to start answering them, and I'm going to try and segregate them between ID masks to start with, and then data relationships later. Actually, at the moment, they're all ID mask related, so that makes it pretty easy. Okay, question number one. How creative can you get with ID masks? Can you use an equals sign, for example? Okay, so let's go back here to this team ID where that still lives. Now, at the moment, we've got the name and then the team ID in circular brackets. So if you remember how it showed Gridfox United and in brackets, the reference field after. Well, the answer is, as long as you have the fields in square brackets, you can get incredibly creative. So let's eliminate these circular brackets. And what I mean by that is you can effectively do whatever you want. So I could even do, all sorts of fun things in here. Space, validate that, get rid of our error message that will be gone soon, and go back to the project, and you can see that that has absolutely filtered those in there. So I guess you can be as creative as you want. Now that's going to be no benefit to anybody, but we assume there'll only be a few ways people want to display this, and that's going to be through a space, a hyphen or a dash, circular brackets. It's probably going to be the extent of it, but you can do whatever you need if that's your desire. Okay, can you ID mask a child onto a parent account? So in this bottom example, what we did was we said we want to take the name from companies and we want to put it in the ID mask here so that the name Sandra now has the company name, which was Brown's, after it. So can we effectively put Sandra in brackets after Brown? The answer to that is no. And this question, I think I saw coming before data relationships was covered. And now that I've gone through that, hopefully you can understand the reason why yourself. Because companies can have many contacts, there would be no use in me having this name after the company because I don't know who it relates to. I could have Sandra, John, Bill, all working at Brown's. Well, which one is it going to pull through? It's not the relationship that would make sense to have that. And actually, when you've got a one-to-many relationship, you're always going to have that problem. So the answer to that is no. You cannot bring ID masks from a child table onto a parent one. And like I said, having seen this relationship stuff, that probably makes sense as to why now. Do you need to do anything different when inputting data with an ID mask? Oh, sorry, importing data with an ID mask. Okay, that makes sense. If I come back out of here, so what someone's basically asking is, because there's an ID mask in here, when I import data through an Excel spreadsheet, do I need to do anything different? And the answer is no. All you need to do is make sure that it says your team name. So in this box, Gridfox City, for example. When you bring it into the software, the ID mask will automatically do this stuff for you. So as long as your spreadsheet's okay, no, you don't need to worry about it. This is an ID mask. It's effectively saying it's a mask that's going on top of the data. So your data can come in as it is, and that will happen automatically. Okay, I think there's just one more question that's come in, and that question is relating to data relationships. And it's not more of a question than a statement, and it is, I don't understand many-to-many relationships. Okay, I'm probably not going to go through it again because I'm repeating what I said. What I will say is there's a few ways to kind of overcome this. The first way is practice, 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 which is what I explained before. And that is, I've made a hypothetical situation where there could be a many-to-many relationship. Just think of other real-life situations where this could occur and start building something. Take my example, use this and build it out. Use something like a shopping experience through Amazon. As a buyer, I can buy many products, but actually the products can be bought by many users. So you could set it up in that way, for example. And there's loads of them out there when you start to think in this way. It might be that you have a train and you might have drivers of trains. Now, if you're trying to log who drives which train or which bus, whatever it might be, trains can have many drivers because you don't normally get one person driving the train at one point. You've got, I think, certainly two at a bare minimum. And drivers can have many trains because they can drive more than just the one they're on at that point. They could, chop and change between those. So there's loads of examples out there, and forgive me for being a bit kooky with that. It was one that I just suddenly thought on the spot. So practice, 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 just to get your head around it. But then let me know how we can make it simpler. I'm hoping the on-screen instructions does make it easy to certainly build. I'm conscious that trying to identify a many-to-many relationship could be trickier, but to build it, I'm hoping these on-screen instructions are really useful. But if not, let us know, and we'll try and go back to the drawing board and think about how we can make it simpler. And finally, I'm here for you guys. We offer a concierge service, and that basically means, look, if you want to hit the ground running and really start with a project and have no idea where to begin, reach out to me. And what I will do is I will either guide you through it, or if you're still not confident enough for that, I'm happy to build something for you in your presence, as long as you're giving me guidelines on what you need. And I'll explain exactly why I'm doing each step, just to give you a thorough understanding of how the software operates. So please reach out, please use us. That's probably a nice segue, seeing that I've got no other questions, into the final slide that I wanted to show you. And that is, if you're not already trialing Gridfox, please feel free to give it a go. You can do so for 14 days with full access to all the features that I've just shown you, simply by going to this website. And we can have that one-to-one session to help you build what you need. You can book it straight into my calendar using this link below, or you can email me directly and we can get something set up, certainly as soon as you need. So I'll leave this screen up for the next couple of minutes, just so that you can see and take note of those links. But failing that, what I wanted to say was thank you all so much for attending today. For those repeat attenders, thank you for witnessing the whole series. I hope it's been useful. The likelihood is I'm going to do another one of these in a few months' time. And the reason for that is, as we've been going along these sessions, you might have noticed some small changes to our software. And over time, that may change again. So I give it a couple of months, and if any new, certainly big features have been released, I'll be able to run through this whole series again and give you an up-to-date version of what you've witnessed. But like I said, thank you again, and all the best building, and hopefully we get to work together if we don't already, and hopefully continue working together if we do. Thanks again.